Welcome. We come to chapter 21 in the Life Divine, the Order of the Worlds. It is a blending of two different chapters which appeared originally in the audio. The first was called The Order of the Worlds. It appeared in April of 1918. And then a chapter 4 months later was titled The Crown of Rebirth. And it appeared on Sri Aurobindo's birthday, 15 August 1918. Here they've been taken out of sequence, combined, and presented in a larger formulation of his argument, metaphysically and cosmologically, to explain to us why it is necessarily so that a universe begins from an apparent inconscient, having fallen from a great superconscience, or immersed itself in apparent darkness, and beginning from there, traces back each of the steps, all the grades of being, until it recovers the enormity and the majesty of what it was, but retaining all the while the densest encasement of matter. Matter shall not be annulled, matter shall not be renounced. To get a sense of what this order of the worlds is that he's speaking about, he has here marshaled some citations from the Mundaka, the Rig Veda, and the Katha. Mundaka and Katha are some of the most popular Upanishads. They're not the earliest, but they are Upanishads which appeared in verse rather late in the development of things. And the Rig Veda, this selection comes from the 53rd hymn in the 10th mandala, so it again is a rather late iteration of Vedic cosmology. So let's look at these three citations, what he calls mottos. 7, sapta, are these worlds in which move the life forces, prana, that are hidden within the secret heart as their dwelling place, 7 by 7, sapta sapta, guhashaya, secret dwelling place. So the idea is that there are 7 worlds, largely speaking, loka, vast, universal. Each one is a universe in itself, but it becomes part of and expressive of a larger universe. And all these 7 worlds and planes exist in your secret being, in your heart of hearts. 7 and 7. 7 in the larger world, 7 inside of you. Correspondence between the microcosm, you're the small universe, and the macrocosm, the large, the grand cosmos. So this is mystic philosophy at its most profound. There is nothing in the world which does not exist within you. No greatness outside, but that already pre-exists inside you, in your heart, in the soul of your being. Wonderful. One fights for 70 years for a glimpse of that, isn't it? Then we go to the Rig Veda. May the peoples of the 5 births accept my sacrifice. Those who are born of the light and worthy of worship. May earth protect us from earthly evil. and the mid-region, antariksha, from calamity from the gods. So we ask Mother Earth to protect us from all ailments that would come to us from her province. She gives the blessing. We proceed happily along the course of life. As we range into the mid-region, antariksha, those are no longer arenas of action which fall under the earth goddess's domain. They are part of the life world, overseen by the gods. So we seek shelter from calamity from the gods. Follow the shining thread spun out across the midworld. Protect the luminous paths built by the thought. Jyotish Mattaha Pata. Become the human being. Create the divine race. So we see this rising from step to step, from earth to mid-region, antariksha, to the world of the mind. And there we become the human. We go beyond that and say, create the divine race, Daivyam Janam. Seers, the Kavi, Kavaya. Seers of truth are you. What is real? What is true? What is true is real. Seers of truth are you. Sharpen the shining spears with which you cut the way to that which is immortal, Amritaya. Knowers of the secret planes, Pada Guhyam. Form them, Kartanayena, the steps by which the gods attained to immortality. Amritattvam. So we see that rising into a consciousness which could assemble a divine race, bring those truth powers here upon earth, create the possibility of us using sharp intuitive vision to cut through and find our way to that home of immortality above. It is this that establishes the gods in immortality and not otherwise. It's their adhesion to truth. They're true to their own being. One who is true to their being will achieve. Then the last citation from the Katha Upanishad. This is the eternal tree, Sanatana Ashwata, with its root above and its branches downward. This is Brahman. This is the immortal, Amritam. In it are lodged all the worlds, Sarva Lokaha, and none goes beyond it. This and that are one. Etad Vaitat. This is that. In other words, this is that. This universe, beyond which you cannot go, is that Brahman. We will come to distinctions by and by. So we see in the first, the summation of the 7 planes of existence. You'll remember Sri Aurobindo chapters and chapters and chapters ago talked about the 7-fold cord of being. Matter, life, mind, supermind linking to Ananda, Chit, Sat. Those are the 7 worlds, all inside of us. And then the Veda speaking, as it were, of how it is that we grow from plane to plane, getting the blessings of earth, getting the blessings of the life powers, reaching into the provinces of mind, but going beyond also to create a divine race. This is the Vedic vision of several thousand years ago. Minimum 3,000-4,000 years ago, which shapes our thoughts still, calls our aspiration yet. And then finally, this idea of the tree with its root above and branches extending downward. This, of course, appears in the Bhagavad Gita because this is essential to understand. This is essential to all of Vedanta, that the origins of the cosmos and of every strand of our being come from there. We are from there. We don't rise from the mud originally. We are children bathing happily in the mud, but we will stand up and clean ourselves off and outgrow our childhood and become great, and our heads will be in the stars even as our feet are upon the earth. Yes. So, chapter 21 then, the order of the worlds. If a spiritual evolution of consciousness in the material world and a constant or repeated rebirth of the individual into an earthly body are admitted, the next question that arises is whether this evolutionary movement is something separate and complete in itself or part of a larger universal totality, of which the material world is only one province. So what is the context of the individual evolving from birth to birth to birth? This question has already its answer implied in the gradations of the involution which precede the evolution and make it possible. For if that precedence is a fact, there must be worlds, or at least planes of higher being, and they must have some connection with the evolution which has been made possible by their existence. It may be that all they do for us is by their effective presence or pressure on the earth consciousness to liberate the involved principles of life and mind and spirit and enable them to manifest and assert their reign in material nature. But it would be in the highest degree improbable that the connection and intervention should cease there. There is likely to be a sustained, if veiled, commerce between material life and the life of the other planes of existence. It is necessary now to look more closely into this problem, regard it in itself, and determine the nature and limits of this connection and intercommunication insofar as it affects the theory of evolution and rebirth in material nature. So in the last chapter, having established the idea that it is necessary to articulate all the possibilities of what the universe contains within it, the individual could not possibly achieve it all in the compass of a single human life. And no human soul could begin on earth and then extend itself eternally into a heaven. It must pre-exist even as it continues to exist. So we must be eternal in some sense and eternally taking birth in time to work out inviting problems of cosmic complexity. So now the question, if we accept that, if we look at these higher planes which have apparently involved themselves and are actual stair steps leading back up to the point of origin, then do they have influence upon our world here? Is it that they have merely a pressure to place on the material plane, or do they continue to have, in a sense, communication, a commerce, an exchange with us as we evolve? Is it simply a downflow, a hidden influence that reaches into us, or is there some field of communication, some means by which the apparently lower is in touch with the significantly higher? The descent of the soul into the ignorance can be thought of as an abrupt precipitation or immediate lapse of a pure spiritual being out of the superconscient spiritual reality into the first inconscience and the subsequent evolving phenomenal life of material nature. So it could be that we fall from there to here. If that were so, there might be the absolute above and the inconscient below, with the material world created out of it, and the issue, the return back, would then be a similar abrupt or precipitous transit from a material embodied world being into the transcendent silence. So this is the soul, having got here somehow, recognizes that the absolute is where it comes from and where it wants to be, does not wish to be part of this dark inconscient nature, and leaps out of it. And of course this is something that has been articulated both in the ancient East and in the ancient West. In the West, the Gnostic Greeks, of course, formulated sophisticated philosophies about this. So we have here, he'll make it plain in just a second, two implied opponents. We have materialism and world-denying Advaita, also in armed combat behind the scenes here in this paragraph. He continues, there would be no intermediate powers or realities other than matter and spirit, no other planes than the material, no other worlds than the world of matter. But this idea is too trenchant and simple a construction and cannot outlive a wider view of the complex nature of existence. So he's not accepting this. There are no doubt several possible originations of cosmic existence by which such an extreme and rigid world balancement could have conceivably come into being. There could have been a conception of this kind and a fiat, that is, a command, an order, in an all-will or an idea, a movement of the soul towards an egoistic material life of the ignorance. The eternal individual soul, urged by some inexplicable desire arising within it, can be supposed to have sought the adventure of the darkness and taken a plunge from its native light into the depths of a nescience out of which arose this world of ignorance. Or a collectivity of souls may have been so moved, the many. For an individual being cannot constitute a cosmos. A cosmos must be either impersonal or multipersonal, or the creation or self-expression of a universal or infinite being. This desire may have drawn down an all-soul with it to build a world based upon the power of the inconscient. If not that, then the eternally omniscient all-soul itself may have abruptly plunged its self-knowledge into this darkness of the inconscience, carrying the individual souls within it to begin their upward evolution through an ascending scale of life and consciousness. Or, if the individual is not pre-existent, if we are only a creation of the all-consciousness, or a fiction of the phenomenal ignorance, either creatrix may have conceived all these myriads of individual beings by the evolution of names and forms out of an original indiscriminate prakriti, nama and rupa again. The soul would be a temporary product of the indiscriminate stuff of inconscient force substance, which is the first appearance of things in the material universe. And this shows the real context of his argument and the nature of the audience that he's speaking to. So these are your choices. This is your menu. Which do you think originates the world? He continues, on that supposition, or on any of them, there could be only two planes of existence. On one side, there is the material universe created out of the inconscient by the blind nescience of force or nature, obedient perhaps to some inner unfelt self which governs its somnambulist activities. On the other side, there is the superconscient one to which we return out of the inconscience and ignorance. So we're back to the antinomy, to the dualism that we met in the first few chapters of the Life Divine, the opposition of matter and spirit. Or else we may imagine that there is one plane only, the material existence. There is no superconscient apart from the soul of the material universe. So we have a choice. There's matter here, spirit there, or maybe there's no spirit at all. There's only matter. If we find that there are other planes of conscious being, and that there already exist other worlds than the material universe, these ideas might become difficult to substantiate, because we would have interposed series of levels of being between matter and spirit. And how did they get there? Where did they come from? What are they doing? Because remember, it's either or. But we can escape from that annulment if we suppose that these worlds have been subsequently created by or for the evolving soul in the course of its ascent out of the inconscience. That means that those worlds don't pre-exist. They're not there until some soul starts evolving, and then the activity perhaps of the soul is what causes them to come into being. In any of these views, the whole cosmos would be an evolution out of the inconscient. We begin from the mud, either with the material universe as its sole and sufficient stage and scene, or else with an ascending scale of worlds, one evolving out of the other, helping to grade our return to the original reality. So they would be useful as a mere staircase by which we ascend, grab hold of the higher reality, and pull ourselves out of the lower. Our own view has been that the cosmos is a self-graded devolution out of the superconscient Satchit Ananda. But in this idea, it would be nothing but an evolution of the inconscience towards some kind of knowledge sufficient to allow by the annihilation of some primal ignorance or some originating desire, the extinction of a misbegotten soul, or an escape out of a mistaken world adventure. Don't conflate the two. Sri Aurobindo states his view, but this is another view. This is a view about the nature of the beginning of the world in an inconscient, which is not his. So now he considers a number of possibilities. But such theories either imply a premier importance and originating power of mind, or a premier importance of the individual being. Both have indeed a great place, but the one eternal spirit is the original power and the original existence. Idea, conceptively creative, not the real idea, which is being aware of what is in itself and automatically self-creative by the force of that truth awareness, is a movement of the mind. Desire is a movement of life in mind. Life and mind must then be pre-existent powers, and must have been the determinants of the creation of the material world, and in that case, they can equally create worlds of their own superphysical nature. So, to arrive at this, we must carefully distinguish this idea of an idea being determinative of a universe from Sri Aurobindo's idea of the supermind. This idea that he talks of, which is conceptively creative, as he says, is a movement of the mind. Desire is a movement of life working inside mind. The real idea, which is a signature of the supramental consciousness, is being already fully aware of itself. And what it creates multitudinously is a self-creative act done within the realm and the belt of that truth consciousness. So, nevertheless, if we grant that idea could be created and that life could manifest desire, then they are active in the world and so might be able to create superphysical planes of existence connecting matter to whatever might be above. But we're still not talking about the real idea of the supermind. We're talking about mind and life operating within their own fields. So these would be worlds of a lower dominion. He continues now, or else we must suppose that what acted was not desire in an individual or a universal mind or life, but a will in the spirit, a will of being deploying something of itself or of its consciousness, realizing a creative idea or a self-knowledge or an urge of its self-active force or a turn to a certain formulation of its delight of existence. But if the world has been created not by the universal delight of existence, but for the desire of the individual soul, its caprice of an ignorant egoistic enjoyment, then the mental individual and not the cosmic being or a transcendent divinity should be the creator and witness of the universe. Now he is such a master of language. Do pay attention reading this, because there are phrases and passages where he's putting forward his own true vision of what is, but then partnering it with language which says, okay, but if the mind were the creator. If the individual had this role as author, then this would be so, that would be so. So he mentions the real idea. He mentions that the will and the spirit, not desire, must be the real creator, but he goes ahead and concedes the argument so much as to let it formulate itself. And you arrive at the idea that either the world's been created because of the desire of the individual soul, or that the mental individual, and not a cosmic being or a Godhead above cosmos, is the creator. Is that really a position that we want to hold? But if you accept these starting points of the argument, then you're going to arrive at this conclusion whether you like it or not. And we're not going to arrive there because he will reject it coming up. In the past trend of human thought, the individual being has always loomed enormously large in the front plan of things and in the premier dimensions of importance. If these proportions could still be maintained, this origination might conceivably be admitted, for a will towards the life of the ignorance, or an assent to it in the individual Purusha, must indeed be part of the operative movement of consciousness in the involutionary descent of the spirit into material nature. But the world cannot be a creation of the individual mind, or a theater erected by it for its own play of consciousness, nor can it have been created solely for the play and the satisfaction or frustration of the ego. As we awake to a sense of the premier importance of the universal and the dependence of the individual upon it, a theory of this kind becomes an impossibility to our intelligence. The world is too vast in its movement for such an account of its working to be credible. Only a cosmic power or a cosmic being can be the creator and the upholder of the cosmos, and it must have too a cosmic and not only an individual reality, significance, or purpose. So we grant that some of the older philosophies and theologies are, to put it simply, anthropocentric. The human is at the middle of it. Or the individual, as we get in modern philosophy, especially Western philosophy, is of paramount importance. So much so that in extreme forms of idealistic thought, all could be the imagination of a single individual. Solipsism, etc. Not a tenable philosophy, nobody believes that, but the idea that really the individual, or the mind, which is the individual's chief instrument of intelligence and enlightenment, could not possibly be that which figured the vast cosmos. Could not be. The cosmos is either self-created by a cosmic being or has come into a kind of order because of the pressure of a transcendence wanting to manifest itself in a cosmic being. So the individual has still a significant place. Mind, as an agent of growing intelligence, is indispensable in that chain that leads us evolutionarily forward. But let's not mistake significance for absolute prominence. Mind will step back from leadership as evolution proceeds. A supramental consciousness will displace it. Accordingly, he writes, this world-creating or participating individual and its desire or assent to the ignorance must have been awake before the world at all existed. It must have been there as an element in some supracosmic superconscient from which it comes and to which it returns out of the life of the ego. We must suppose an original immanence of the many in the one. It becomes then conceivable that a will or an impetus or a spiritual necessity may have stirred in some transmundane infinite, in some of the many, which precipitated them downward and compelled the creation of this world of the ignorance. So here he's pursuing the notion of the individual as possible creator, or that some act of an individual or a collection of individuals in the larger many could have begun this immense descent into the cosmos. But since the One is the premier fact of existence, since the many depend upon the One, are souls of the One, beings of the being, this truth must determine also the fundamental principle of the cosmic existence. There we see that the universal precedes the individual, gives it its field, is that in which it exists cosmically, even though its origin is in the transcendence. So the individual in the universe arises within the universal context. It does not precede the formation. It is always contextualized within it, patterned soul by soul by soul within the many as an expression of the One. This too, Sri Aurobindo has written extensively about in earlier chapters, especially those focusing on the nature of the supermind. So what is true above, you might say, is true also here. The individual soul, he writes, lives here by the all-soul and depends upon it. The all-soul very evidently does not exist by the individual or depend upon it. It is not a sum of individual beings, a pluralistic totality created by the conscious life of individuals. If an all-soul exists, it must be the one cosmic spirit supporting the one cosmic force in its works. And it repeats here, modified in the terms of cosmic existence, the primary relation of the dependence of the many on the one. This is a truth that emerges from the transcendence and has universal application. So this may be dispiriting, this may be discouraging to the human ego, which would like to think of itself as being alienable, separable in an absolute sense from all things. I depend on no one, I am a rock, I am an island, and yet it is not so. No man is an island, entire unto itself. Each man is a piece of the continent, a part of the whole. It is inconceivable that the many should have independently or by a departure from the one will desired cosmic existence and forced by their desire the supreme Satchit Ananda to descend unwillingly or tolerantly into the nescience. That would be to reverse altogether the true dependence of things. So there is a one existence. Could the many rise up within the one and say, hey, you one, we're going to make you do what we wish you to do, and so we want to go there? No. The many have not that power. They are expressions of the one. There is no rebellion, no palace coup possible within the being of the one. If the world was directly originated by the will or the spiritual impetus of the many, which is possible and even probable in a certain sense, there must still have been first a will in Satchit Ananda to that end. Otherwise, the impetus, translating here the all-will into desire, for what becomes desire in the ego is will in the spirit, could not have arisen anywhere. The one, the all-soul, by whom alone the consciousness of the individual is determined, must first accept the veil of inconscient nature before the individual too can put on the veil of the ignorance in the material universe. So you see that this one, this being which we call Sat-Chit Ananda, Sat-Chit Ananda, existence, consciousness, bliss, has through its internal power, Chit Tapas, its conscious will force, descended, bringing its oneness into multiple expression into the universe. And what was true, luminous being above becomes the basis of darkened material nature here. Will there, which gave impetus to the whole rise of the cosmos, becomes here operative in the universe. Desire, which goads things forwards. And on these correspondences go. So it is a decision of the one, this conscious being whose nature is delight, that leads to this manifestation. One more paragraph. But once we admit this will of the Supreme and cosmic being as the indispensable condition of the existence of the material universe, it is no longer possible to accept desire as the creative principle. For desire has no place in the Supreme or in the All-Being. So, an individual mind or an individual, we've discovered, cannot be the impeller of the cosmos, nor can desire be the impeller of the cosmos. He is speaking of the Supreme or the All-Being. It can have nothing to desire. Desire is the result of incompleteness, of insufficiency, of something that is not possessed or enjoyed, and which the being seeks for possession or enjoyment. The all-will above is a flow of one being. Sat-Chit Ananda is the single being, but as it distributes itself, as it fractures itself to become the many-sided cosmos, that one will differentiates itself into desire, so that things can move from fragmentation back to unity. One thing tries to associate with or to enclose and globe another thing, to make it an object of its eating. The eater eating is eaten, in the image of the Upanishads. This is the action of desire in the universe. It is not the original will that projected the universe into being. A supreme and universal being can have the delight of its all existence, but to that delight, desire must be foreign. It can only be the appanage of the incomplete evolutionary ego, which is a product of the cosmic action. And an appanage is a provision for maintenance. It's just an element in the general play. It's there to use. Its purpose is utilitarian, but not deliberative and not definitive. Moreover, if the all-consciousness of the Spirit has willed to plunge into the inconscience of matter, it must be because that was a possibility of its self-creation or manifestation. Remember, it contains all possibilities. But a soul, material universe, and an evolution there, out of inconscience into spiritual consciousness, cannot be the one solitary and limited possibility of manifestation of the all-being. That could only be if matter were the original power and form of manifested being, and the spirit had no other choice, could not manifest except through inconscience into matter as a basis. But his whole thesis is that this is not possible. It contains so much more than mere materiality. This would bring us to a materialistic evolutionary pantheism. Pantheism is the idea that the world, all in the world, pan, is God. Theism, that sees the world as God. That identifies nature and the divine. Sri Aurobindo's view is more sophisticated. We'll get to it. This would bring us to a materialistic evolutionary pantheism. So there could be an evolution within this deity which is identical with nature, but it would be only within the material belt, a materialistic evolutionary pantheism. We would have to regard the beings who people the universe as souls of the One, souls born here in it, and evolving upward through inanimate, animate, and mentally developed forms till the recovery of their complete and undivided life in the superconscient pantheos and its cosmic oneness would intervene as the end and goal of their evolution. In that case, everything has evolved here. Life, mind, soul have arisen out of the One in the material universe by the force of its hidden being. And everything will fulfill itself here in the material universe. There is then no separate plane of the superconscience, for the superconscient is here only, not elsewhere. There are no supraphysical worlds. There is no action of supraphysical principles exterior to matter, no pressure of an already existent mind and life upon the material plane. So he leaves you with the idea of a flat universe without hierarchy, if this pantheism is the right view. So there's a danger here, and he's saying, beware. This is not my perspective. Because certainly he asserts that supraphysical worlds and planes do exist, intervening between the belt of the ignorant world, mind, life, body that we live in, and the higher being, the supreme, the One. But I said we'd stop there, and we will put our bookmark there, and we'll take it up next time. We'll continue. So let's read from Savitri. Finding new passages to read from is increasingly difficult. Never to have read one. I think I've already erred a couple of times, if ever it is. This is from Book 6, the Book of Fate, Canto 2, The Way of Fate and the Problem of Pain. A mind arose that stared at nothingness, till figures formed of what could never be. It housed the contrary of all that is. A naught appeared as being's huge sealed cause, its dumb support in a blank infinite, in whose abysm spirit must disappear. A darkened nature lived and held the seed of spirit hidden and feigning not to be. Eternal consciousness became a freak of an unsouled almighty inconscient, and breathed no more as spirit's native air. Bliss was an incident of a mortal hour, a stranger in the insentient universe. As one drawn by the grandeur of the void, the soul attracted leaned to the abyss. It longed for the adventure of ignorance, and the marvel and surprise of the unknown, and the endless possibility that lurked in the womb of chaos and in nothing's gulf, or looked from the unfathomed eyes of chance. It tired of its unchanging happiness. It turned away from immortality. It was drawn to hazard's call and danger's charm. It yearned to the pathos of grief, the drama of pain, perdition's peril, the wounded bear escape, the music of ruin and its glamour and crash, the savor of pity and the gamble of love, and passion and the ambiguous face of fate. A world of hard endeavor and difficult toil, and battle on extinction's perilous verge, a clash of forces, a vast incertitude, the joy of creation out of nothingness, strange meetings on the roads of ignorance, and the companionship of half-known souls, or the solitary greatness and lonely force of a separate being conquering its world, called it from its too safe eternity. A huge descent began, a giant fall, for what the spirit sees creates a truth, and what the soul imagines is made a world. A thought that leaped from the timeless can become indicator of cosmic consequence and the itinerary of the gods, a cyclic movement in eternal time. Thus came, born from a blind, tremendous choice, this great, perplexed, and discontented world, this haunt of ignorance, this home of pain. There are pitched desire's tents, grief's headquarters. A vast disguise conceals the eternal's bliss. So, we are on the verge of Sri Aurobindo's birthday. So, one feels the glow already. So, namaste. Jai Ma. Much love to you all. And